for a while.
Yeah.
We are going live now.
Okay. All right. Oh, I need to get ready here. Okay, Miss Lydia, I have 3:30.
We're live.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, November the 17th agenda session. Could I have a motion on the minutes, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, with no objection, we have a motion and a second. With no objection, the minutes will stand as recorded. On ordinances final reading this afternoon, we have several planning items. Do we have any questions or comments concerning these planning items? Questions or comments concerning these? Okay. If not, we will move on to ordinances on first reading, which we went over all of these, particularly in fact, that is all of these ordinances last week in our Public Works and Transportation committee meeting. Is there any questions or comments, and they have been read into the minutes, by the way, questions or comments concerning any of these first readings? Councilwoman Burrs.
Yes, sir. I believe last week we talked about a litter policy, or Councilman Mitchell talked about a litter policy, and I didn't see it on strategic planning, and I don't see it anywhere here today. I just wondered where that was.
It's my understanding he was going to cover that in his committee, Public Works and Committee next week.
Next week. Thank you.
Yeah, in committee. Yeah. All right. Any other questions concerning the items on first reading for Public Works and or Transportation?
Councilman, I'm sorry, this is Phil on here. I must have missed you on the front end of this, but item E under 6E was the one that I had some questions about here from the attorneys involved on the other side. And that was the relocation provisions here for mandatory referral 2020-0133. And the only reason I had an alternate version, at least I sent to you this morning here on that issue, is that there is at least the agreement to provide for the relocation of this street, which is currently known as Bluff Street, and they're wanting to rename it to be Lucy Lane in connection with this development. They are also wanting to try to have that property at least become part of their property as a negotiated sale under the agreement. And that has to be approved by y'all on the council under section 2-567. And I provided a revised version of that. Would request that maybe you defer it 1 week on that one item, just so you can discuss that one and make sure you're comfortable with what is involved.
Okay, just item E.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that's the only one.
That is in Councilwoman Coonrod's district, and does not look like she's present. Councilman Byrd, I know the item before, item D, includes your district as well. Is this something that you would be willing to defer for a week?
Of course.
Okay, all right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I feel like we could give you enough time to.
Yes, sir. I've got it all prepared at this point, and it can be presented to you. I just wanted to make sure we had notice to the public as well.
Okay, all right, very well.
Yes, sir.
All right, if no other questions concerning our first reading ordinances, we'll move to resolutions, which we covered last week as well. Resolutions A and B. Any questions concerning those, either one of those two items? Councilwoman Burrs, is that an old hand?
Oh, sir. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Any questions concerning our two resolutions for this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. purchasing questions. If you would pull up your purchases for this afternoon. It's my understanding that we will be getting some information on an emergency purchase this afternoon. Is there any questions concerning the couple of purchase items that we have on tonight's agenda? Okay, Councilman Ledford.
Mr. Chairman, is Tony available to answer a question about the emergency purchase before we get to this evening's?
He is on the call. It's something that you want to know before.
If he
Obviously,
could
he's just going to give us a report, but.
Right, that the emergency purchase, I believe the reimbursement, we are eligible for reimbursement on that emergency purchase through the state. I just wanted to confirm that.
Let me bring in.
Make that a part of the public record.
Miss Lydia, bring in Jermaine Freeman, please.
Yes, sir.
Hey, how we doing, Council?
Hey, Jermaine. Good evening.
Good to see you.
Councilman Ledford?
Yeah, Jermaine, the emergency purchase tonight, am I understanding for public record, that is eligible for reimbursement through the state?
That is correct, through the state CARES dollars. That is correct.
Okay, very good. That's all. I just want to make that part of
Okay.
the record and make sure everybody understood that. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Jermaine.
All right, Miss Lydia, you can excuse our guest.
Oh, wait, I got a question for Jermaine.
Oh, you do? I didn't see your hand. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Jermaine, also, will you, because there are constituents on here listening, explain about the reimbursement? How does that work and why we're having to, pay it out of our budget and it's reimbursed to us versus simple just applying for the funds?
Yes, because we are a local government, we are eligible for reimbursement for some of those state CARES dollars, which is why it makes it possible for us to get reimbursed. And so that is why, and with SIMPA working closely with the Hamilton County Health Department on the expansion of COVID-19 testing out in the community, that's why it makes sense for us to get reimbursed. The funds that we are using to pay for this come out of contingency funds for us. Every year when we create the budget, we always have money set aside for contingency expenses. These are expenses that come up that are sort of unforeseen. Obviously, COVID-19 is a huge unforeseen expense, but we are eligible for reimbursement for these expenses through the CARES money provided to the state.
Thank you, Jermaine.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you good, Councilwoman? All right, Miss Lydia, now you can excuse our guest. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Council, if you would pull up your November the 24th agenda and see if you have any questions on next week's agenda. Any questions? All right, very well. Let's take a look at our future considerations. And let me know if you have any questions concerning future considerations that we need to address. All right, very well. I'm seeing no questions on future considerations. We have no departmental report this afternoon. So at this time, if there are no other questions or comments for this council under the agenda session, I will now turn it over to Councilman Anthony Byrd for Public Safety Committee. Councilman Byrd, the chair is now yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Chair. May I have a minute approval, please?
Vote to approve.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. At this time, Lydia, is Miss Kay Baker on?
I will find out.
She is.
Hello, Ms. Baker. Are you there?
There we go. Okay.
Hello,
Hey.
Ms. Baker. How you doing?
Good. Thank you.
Hey, awesome. Thank you for joining us today. This kind of like your first introductory to the world, to the city of Chattanooga, and to everyone here when it comes to the Police Advisory and Review Committee. If you can, before we get into your report, could you please just introduce yourself and your team? Are they here?
Well, my name's Kay Baker. I'm currently the chair of the park group. I only know of one other person because she reached out to me via text message, and it's the vice chair, Marianne Hensley.
Okay.
I don't know that anyone else is on. I don't know how to check that, so
That's
that's
okay.
above my pay grade. So, yeah. So, do you want me to just kind of give a summary, or?
If you will, please.
Okay. So as you all know, it took us a while to kind of get started in hearing actual cases because we had to go through the process of doing the Citizens Academy. We did 3 ride-alongs. We were scheduled to do the use of force training day right before COVID hit, and we couldn't do that as a group because of COVID. I think we finally got to do that in July. And then but between, January and July, we had different trainings. We had members of the police department giving us background information on what we'd be doing. We had the city attorney's office kind of giving us a summary of open records, open meetings, legal issues that we might come upon. And so our first meeting where we actually heard cases was in October. So and we meet the first Thursday of every month. And our October and November meetings were at 8:30, beginning at 8:30. Starting in December, we've moved that to 9. So it'll always be the first Thursday of every month unless we decide otherwise. I think that's what it says in the ordinance. And we had a lot of cases in October. We had 19 cases, and there were a total of 23 officers. So some cases might have 2 officers, so there were more officers that we reviewed. November was a little smaller. We had 7 cases involving 9 officers. It's been a challenge to get this thing off the ground, but I was telling my husband, an analogy was, the Wright brothers, they thought about flying a plane with a person on it in 1896, and it didn't happen until 1903. Now, it's not going to take us that long, but there's kinks in every new process, and we've been seeing that, and some of it's just been technical. We obviously do our meetings like you do via Zoom. And so we had a few technical difficulties at the beginning to see some of the cases, but we worked it all out, and I feel like we've done a really good job. I mean, we handled a lot of cases that first meeting. We had a lot of questions, but they went pretty smoothly. I got good feedback from the police department, the chain of command that participated in the meeting. They all felt like it went really well. They appreciated all of our questions. They seemed to understand that, we, as lay people, we do have just questions about details that may or may not affect the outcome of the decision, but it's because it's part of the process that we have those questions, and they've been very helpful in answering any questions that we have all had.
Awesome. Okay. Before we get started, I want to know if are there any questions at this point that any of my colleagues have for Ms. Kay? Okay. I see one hand right here, Ms. Kay. Councilman Darren Lefford.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Ms. Baker. Thanks for coming on with us today. My question is quickly, do you see any areas of concern that we need to address or that your board needs to address at this time going forward?
I don't see any major issues right now. None have been brought to my attention. Like I said, the kinks that we had in the technical process, we've worked that out. Having only heard 2 months of cases, what we do, so we get our recommendation, we send it to the chief, and then he would review the cases, and we are notified what his decisions are. But we haven't had enough time to really gather enough information on where that, are we agreeing a lot more than we're disagreeing? So we don't have data yet. I spoke to Councilman Byrd about, now the ordinance requires a quarterly report to the city council. I suggested to him that the first quarterly report be in January, and that would allow us to cover 3 months of meetings, so October, November, and December. I think I still don't know that we're going to have a lot of data to maybe make any changes at that point or make any, recommendations for changes. The process itself seems to be working. And so right now, no one's brought any major concerns to my attention. But the quarterly report to you will give you, if we do have some major issues with process or procedure. Also, I'll be giving you the statistics, kind of like what I did in my presentation, how many cases we've looked at. Hopefully by January, I'll have all the chief of police's decisions back to the extent that he can do that. And we'll have a good understanding of how often we are agreeing with the chain of command decision on any discipline, and then what the chief of police did. So the January report should be pretty helpful. Again, it's a first step. These processes take a while to kind of work out issues, but I think January will give us a good idea of the number of cases we're looking at and how often we're agreeing. I mean, I can't give you the statistics right now, but I only can think of 2, maybe 3 cases where the majority of Park disagreed with the decision of the chain of command. Now, we haven't heard from the chief yet, so we have to see where he falls on those. So I think the process is working fine, as far as I can tell.
Very good. Well, thank you for your service and your diligence in this, and all the board members, because I know it takes quite a bit of your time and it is a great value to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Ledford. Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you for our services, also for your committee. All the cases that you have looked at in October, I believe you said you got a lot of them. Are they community driven?
Yeah, so I looked at the math on that, and of the 19 cases, I think 8 of them were citizen complaints. And then in, I've lost my notes on November. We had 7 cases in November. I want to say 4 were citizen complaints. And the rest came up through chain of command, like an officer or a supervisor noticed a subordinate violating a policy, pursuit policy, a variety of policies. We're seeing a lot of variety, all the way up to pursuit policies, use of force. We've seen at least one of those too.
The reason I asked that question because, the intent of the advisory board is your mission statement, and also our ordinance speaks about citizen driven. So what I'm hearing from you is that some of the things that I'm assuming the police department is bringing to you is kind of like HR concerns more so than citizen driven concerns.
I would disagree with the characterization that those are HR concerns. For instance, one officer, and I'm not going to get into details about who it was, but was brought before chain of command and ultimately us for discourtesy charge when he was alleged to have been discourteous to another agency's law enforcement employee. It might seem not like a big deal, but I feel like if an officer is willing to be rude and discourteous to a fellow officer of another agency, then what might he or she do to a citizen who has no authority or control over anything? The use of force or the vehicle pursuit policies, a person might not notice the officer, but if internally they see that an officer is driving his or her car erratically or in violation of policy, whether a citizen sees it or not, or reports it or not, I don't see that that's any different. I mean, it's misconduct is misconduct in my opinion. And I feel like, I mean, yeah, sure, one or two of the cases might have been the officer did not turn in a key, a car got towed and he didn't turn in a key. Yeah, that might seem, you know, kind of silly and the citizen didn't complain. Well, actually on that one, a citizen did complain because it was his car, so disregard. And they couldn't find his key and the officer had it in his trunk, so it's fine. Everything worked out. But I just feel like that of the cases we looked at, there were non-citizen complaint cases where the conduct is significant enough that if the police can't police themselves and if we can't help them do that, then how can they properly police in the community that they are supposed to serve? So you're right, not all of them are citizen complaints, but just because the citizen doesn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Or just because a citizen didn't see it didn't mean it didn't happen. A lot of negatives, I apologize. So I appreciate your question for sure, because it's probably, again, the math, 50% are citizen complaints and 50% are chain of command complaints.
The reason I bring, Chair, can I say something else? I'm sorry.
Of course.
The reason I brought that up is because the original, and I can't speak for all council people, but I can speak for myself. The original thing that I envisioned was that you would deal with citizen complaints. And I know you say that's not HR, but to my opinion, it is HR, that they're bringing to you about things that should be handled within a department with their own HR department. And things that the citizens that they're looking for is complaints about the police acting incorrectly, not professionally, and in the community, things that are been someone been arrested, that they feel like they was arrested falsely, things that or someone been handcuffed and maybe treated a little bit rough. These are things that I think a lot of community people were looking at to see. And I'm just surprised that whoever's bringing these cases to you are bringing cases that, in my opinion, is HR cases.
Awesome.
Could
Councilman
I?
Gilbert.
Oh, sorry. Could I respond to
Of
that?
course. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Kay.
So, Councilman Gilbert, you're absolutely right. The plain reading of the ordinance uses the word citizen complaints. I agree with that. And it's your ordinance, the city council, it's your ordinance. It's up to y'all to decide what you want us to look at. But I think the spirit of the ordinance was that we review all misconduct, any violation of policy by a police officer. The group that we replaced, they went by ARC. That's what they did. They looked at every policy violation that happened. And I was just quickly looking through some notes. I mean, we had a case on a taser violation. An officer was brought up on use of his taser. It wasn't a citizen complaint. I mean, don't you want that case reviewed by a citizen panel I mean, if an officer is using it improperly, maybe they need more training on taser use or something like that. And that's part of our mandate in the ordinance as well later on. And Phil probably knows the section numbers better than I do, but part of our mandate is also to advise the police and the council on possible changes in policy and training for police officers. And if we're not looking at every single act of policy violation, whether it's turning in a car key on evidence or driving a car at 100 miles an hour down a highway, whether a citizen reports that or not, I think the spirit of the ordinance would dictate that we should look at all of it. But again, I mean, the whole committee, we had a conversation about it. We understand the ordinance does specifically say citizen complaints, but I think there's a disconnect in the overall spirit of the ordinance and that specific language. But again, we all agree, the committee, we agree that it's the council's ordinance. So we're willing and ready to do whatever you'd like. it might require more conversation amongst yourselves, though.
Yeah, I think that, again, when the intent of my knowledge of the intent of the ordinance was to basically citizen complaints. Also looking at policies that citizens are complaining about that could be tweaked. That was my vision personally. I can't speak for everybody on the council, but that's what I would vision that this advisory board is all about. I think a lot of people in community, that's what they feel. They feel that this board should be community driven. If we are looking at, again, my opinion, HR cases, then the community is going to say, well, what's this board's about? I know you said the other board, the board before you was doing that, but that's when we try to get away from what they was doing, because the citizens and people in my area felt like the board was not effective at all.
Mhm.
And based off of what you're saying, I can see why they're saying that. So again, I can't speak for all council people, but I would like to see more citizens-driven complaints, looking at policies that affect the citizens in our neighborhoods, more so than something that HR and police department should be telling. If a policeman is driving 100 miles an hour, either they need to be written up or get dismissed, my opinion, because they endanger somebody's life. That's something that should have been clear with their HR.
Thank you, Councilman Gilbert. Let me go to Chairperson Chip Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. So I disagree a little bit with Councilman Gilbert on what he was saying. And in fact, when we were crafting the ordinance, it was my opinion all along that we were replacing ART with this citizen-driven board. And I think to build a full portfolio, when you're looking at cases, I think you need to look at citizen complaint as well as chain of command initiated complaints. So I really do think that this board replaces the previous board that we had, which looked at all complaints, citizen and chain of command. And I just think to be able to build a full portfolio, we need for this board to look at both. If we need to tweak the ordinance or to define it a little bit better, I think the language needs to be, I definitely think the language needs to be in there that it will hear chain of command complaints as well as citizen complaints as well. And I would like to thank Ms. Baker for the job she's doing, outstanding job of leading this new board. And I'm sure starting anything like this is a daunting task, but my hat's off to you. But I do think that it needs to include both complaints, chain of command and citizen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councilwoman Burrs. Unmute your mic, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kay, thanks very much for taking the chairperson of this. I know Kay from the Justice Committee on the Mayor's Council for Women, and we couldn't have a better chair. Thank you very much for doing that. But I've got a question. You can only review what's given to you, right? So is it your feeling or understanding that there are some citizens' complaints that don't make it to your committee?
No, I'm not hearing that at all. I do not think that's true.
Okay, so nothing's being kept from you. So what keeps citizens' complaints coming are the citizens. And if everything is coming to you, then the issue may be that citizens aren't complaining. If it's your true understanding that maybe they are, but they're not getting to you. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not hearing any evidence that citizens are, if they're filing complaints, we're not seeing them. You know, one of the things we did talk about as a group was that there might be certain citizens that might not want to complain directly to the police department. So as part of the ordinance and, excuse me, our bylaws, I think it's in the ordinance, I know it's in our bylaws, that we can accept citizen complaints. So if a person in your district, you know, has a complaint, police car driving too fast or whatever, they can submit that complaint to their district representative. And then there's a 3-day turnaround where I have to get the chair, whoever that is, has to get it to IA. The process of investigating it is the same, but the individual who has the issue can give it to someone that maybe they know or feel better about giving it to because it's a fellow citizen. We also will accept anonymous complaints, and the CPD also accepts anonymous complaints. Now, obviously the problem or the concern with investigating an anonymous complaint is that you can't follow up with the complainant and get more details if their statement is not detailed enough. But as part of the reporting that we get and that the chair's required to do is we will keep track of the officers who have the complaint. So if over time, and again, the Wright brothers example, if over time we see the same officer's name showing up, even if it's an anonymous complaint, well, maybe there's something to look into. And as a committee, we could make that recommendation to the chief under the ordinance. So yes, I don't think it's the case that we're not getting the citizen complaints. I think they're just not as many as you might think. And part of that might be because people don't want to go through that process and talk to, and they can do it via email, anonymously or not. And email is, they'll accept those complaints via email. But once, you know, we could get the word out somehow that a park committee member could accept a complaint from a constituent or anyone. I mean, I wouldn't care if somebody walked up to me at the grocery store and said, I know you're on Park and I'm not in your district, but I have this complaint, and they give it to me. I'm going to take it. And then I'm going to, you know, submit it through that process. So.
Thank you. One follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's your understanding, and from what you said, I think it's my understanding as well, that there's nothing standing in the way of citizen complaints. There are a number of avenues in which citizen complaints can get to you all safely. Yes?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes,
All right.
ma'am.
All right. And I have to agree with Councilman Henderson. I think that even though it may be from not a direct citizen complaint, if there's officer misbehavior at some time, that could turn into a citizen complaint. And frankly, I'd rather be proactive than reactive. So thank you very, very much for your report. Good job.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kay, for serving. I know it could be very trying. But first, I want to apologize to you because we've let you all down. We rushed this thing, and a lot of people, you know, that's serving on the board, they're not really satisfied with it. They were hoping to have more teeth in it. Our citizens aren't satisfied with it because, you know, as you know, they're trying to get it on the ballot in March to have it passed for some additional things. However, I agree with Councilman Henderson about it shouldn't just be citizen driven, because the issue with our internal affairs, that's how some things came up about, you know, an officer who had done some things and the information didn't get passed along. So I think the Internal Affairs Department, they have a responsibility too, that when things are entered into the system that are not right, that they need to pass it on. So those things can be investigated too, along with, you know, citizen complaints and the chain of command as well. But I think for me is that I think the news have a job. Let me just say, preface with what I'm about to say. And so their role is anything that when it comes to a white officer having misconduct towards anybody black, then they're gonna blow it up. But what we don't hear about is when it's a a black officer that's having misconduct against individuals. And I want to hear about them all. It doesn't matter if you're a white officer, if you're a bad officer, if you got misconduct, you're violating policies. We need to hear about all of that. But the news won't share that. They won't share that. And that's the most frustrating thing that it is. And they'll blow it up as if you guys are just having to deal with white officers beating on black people and shooting and killing us. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. So when it comes to the subpoena power, what I would like to see added in there is that council have the ability to compel. We have the ability to subpoena. And our citizens right now are thinking, well, nobody can subpoena. No, they just don't have any teeth with that. But that's where your teeth come in, that is through council. So we would need to know, hey, if this is a situation that need to be further investigated or, further information or something, let us know, because that's how we can bring it to ask those additional questions, although we're not investigators. That's another thing. See, and you all aren't investigators either. Like, you're there to review the information and pass it on and hold it, make sure that you're holding the people accountable to it. Even our chief of police, if you all do not agree with his findings or what he go the next step, because you don't have to agree with that. And if you all feel like as a body of people, like this, clearly something was wrong. But my question to you, Ms. K, is, are the cases that you're reviewing, are there cases that are current? So if something happened yesterday, you will review that case, or is this cases that officers have already had, their sanction on, and you're now reviewing those cases?
No, our review happens before the chief makes his final decision on whether there was a violation of policy, and if there was, what the punishment should be. So all the cases that we've looked at have not had the officer sanctioned yet or disciplined. And as far as them being old, I mean, I guess that depends on what your definition of old is, because it takes time for the internal affairs or chain of command to actually do the investigation. We're not going to see, if we saw on the news something, really tragic that happened in Chattanooga by a city officer, the park's not going to look at that right away, because the police department has to investigate it also. As far as what we have seen, so the cases we've seen in October and November, all but one, the conduct happened in 2020. So there was one that happened in 2019, but it was a little more complicated or complex, not complicated, complex. So there were more things to look at. And so it took the IA division a little bit longer to finish their investigation. But, so I guess my background, I in the criminal justice league, I understand that things take time and sometimes it's longer than you'd like. But like I said, all the cases we've seen were from 2020, except that one from 2019. And I think it was maybe July 20, I don't remember exactly when into 2019, but and that can be part of my report in January, if that's something that y'all are interested in, is the dates, how long it takes to get through the process. Y'all can tell me what you want in the report. Give me some time, give me some lag time. I do have a day job. I'd be glad to give you whatever you need.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I would just, my last ask, Councilman Byrd, and I'll be done, is that as a council, that we comb through this ordinance, because a lot of, everybody's voice wasn't included in this thing. I mean, I'm probably was one of the biggest stickler about the police back then, and still, we'll hold them accountable thank you, Russell, for presenting it, but I think we left out a lot of important pieces or important feedback from council members that could have been implemented into this ordinance, because it's not as strong as it could be. It's very weak. It's got a lot of loopholes in it. And I think we're not really doing our people, Kay and the other 8 any service about, serving on it if we don't have the ordinance right. And I just would like for us to think about that and how we can correct it and put more teeth in it. And I also would like for Phil as our attorney, like, we got to start challenging our state legislature. We got to, because we need to create something that's going to be helpful for Chattanooga. We don't live in Atlanta. We don't live in Nashville. I get that. We don't live in Minnesota and all those other places. We live in Chattanooga, and we need to have an ordinance that's unique to our city. And when it's dealing with our police and the oversight and holding them accountable with that. So that's just my ask.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gilbert.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was listening to Councilwoman Coonrod. I think, Phil, you on?
Yes, sir.
I think some of the things that we have desired to put into this ordinance state but did not allow us to do. So when someone said that it's kind of more so weak, it's based off of what state will allow us to do and what we cannot, correct?
Yes, sir. The state has specifically put in a provision dealing with community oversight boards that limit your authority. They preempt your authority to go too far. We have tried to go to the extent that you have that authority here in this area. That's why our provision does provide for a subpoena by the city council, and the state legislation would not allow the community oversight board to have that power. But you do have that power within your council here if there is a need to do so. But I don't think there's been a request for a subpoena to this point. Kay hadn't spoken to that, but I have not seen one.
Thank you. Chair, I think there's some members out there that's on this board that might want to say a few words. Okay, that's possible?
Of course. I think that people as a community oversight board, one of the things I look forward to is introducing this entire board to the community so that people would know that we pick people from the community that are your neighbors and that live close to you. Lydia, do we have anyone from the board in attendance with us at this time?
Do they need to raise a hand?
If you can raise your hand if you're a part of the board. Okay. Who do we have that, Miss Lydia?
Christy Rashid.
Christy? Is that a member?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, could you bring Christy in, please?
Christy Rashid.
Rashid, yes, Miss Christy Rashid, yes.
Okay. And I have a Michael Watkins.
Yes, he's on the board.
Michael
too.
Watkins. Yeah, that's
Bring Mr. Watkins in.
Okay.
Hello, Miss Christy.
Hello, how are you all?
Hey, thank you so much for joining us and giving us this update. We've been hearing from Miss Kay. Is it anything that you would like to talk to us about or say at this time?
I think our board need to have, as I said, more bite in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our community need to know how to really reach us. Because what I'm seeing is that, like I said earlier, to the committee, I see more internal issues going on with the police department than externality. And I don't know if our citizens have been given the proper access to file the complaints, but most of the complaints that we've had, they've been internal, which to me personally, I feel could have been handled. I got on the board to represent the community and citizens that did not have a voice. So that's why I'm on. I am very concerned about our internal issues with the police department, but by the time we get the case, IA has looked at them, and then the Assistant Chief Glenn Scruggs, he signed off. So basically what we're doing, we're going back behind them, looking at a lot of cases. And to me, we don't know, as Kay said at this time, what the chief has final agreed or disagreed with what the recommendations are. So I think we need a little more bite in this ordinance and be able to let the community know we are here for you. So should you have a concern, come to us and let us know. Then that way we will know, because one of the committee members had a issue. We have different cases coming in, but we have some numbers that were skipped. So, you know, I want to make sure that I'm getting all the cases that belong to the community. That's my biggest concern, is community representation.
Exactly. And Miss Christy Rashid, first of all, thank you so much for sitting on this board, and thanks so much for your opinion. And I think this is the foundation that we're building so that we can have the stability that we need. And by you being a part of this and giving us this information, we will be able to address these issues in the future. So thank you so much for your concerns and your information coming in, because these things will be addressed.
I appreciate your time and
thank you.
Serving on this board. You know, I'm retired 38 years from the Electric Power Board.
Hey,
and,
congratulations.
Yeah, God is good. And things are working in our community. I serve on different boards here. And that's the reason why I accepted this challenge, because I wanted all people to be represented and treated fairly.
That's true. And this body would have it no other way, ma'am. Thank you so much. Mr. Michael?
Yes, sir.
Hello, how are you doing, sir? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Is there anything you'd like to say to this body?
I think Christy said some things, and in our last meeting, I raised the question because we get several numbers and then there'll be a skip sequence and then a couple more cases. I want to make sure we're not being eliminated from the reviews of any cases. And I think that was our request, that we be provided the complete list of all cases that are filed, whether they're internal or external, would not and should not matter to us. I think the other piece is the captains and the police officers that have been in attendance with us have been very forthright with any questions that we have asked, and have in fact given us anything and everything we've asked for so far.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Watkins. Really appreciate your input. And these issues will be talked about and addressed. Thank you so much, Mr. Watkins.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Miss Kay, if you can, definitely, we're going to have another conversation and another committee meeting. And I look forward to your report in January. Councilman Gilbert, is that an old hand?
Yeah, it's a new hand.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Since you deal with media, sir, and you know what I'm finna straight talk about, I've been hearing about getting the information to the board. Can we not create an email that citizens, like we can blast it? If you have any complaints, send it to this email that any of the board members can look at any time. Start looking at complaints from the community.
I think that would be something. I think that would be awesome. I also have talked to Kay about the oversight board, and unfortunately, we couldn't see the pictures of the other members that came up. And you know, people a lot of times will address that this community oversight board doesn't look like me. The guy that I appointed to represent District 8, Sylvester Harris, is a retired Boilermaker, African-American from East Chattanooga. And there's plenty of other different racial levels or people that are sitting on this board. So I think it represents Chattanooga tremendously, but I think the community needs to see how this board looks, to see a picture of the board. So I would like to see even something on the Chattanooga.gov website that people can go to, and to just also do some type of meet the board, you know, so that our community can see the board that will be representing them and receiving the complaints. I think that's something that we should do as soon as possible. and put that out there. And I also feel that some of the issues that we have heard today from the other committee members and Ms. K, I don't like copying off of other people's paperwork. Other cities, I like when Councilwoman Coonrod said we are not the other cities, because we put this board in place thanks to you, Councilman Gilbert and Councilwoman Coonrod, before George Floyd, before the Breonna Taylor, we were putting this board in place. And it's some things that need to be tightened up, and it's some things that need to be addressed. And one thing that I'm sure of is that any of these questions that we have for Chief Roddy, the number sequence, this board can call Chief Roddy to a committee meeting and have him answer those questions for us. So I just think we're building the foundation to build a strong house on, and Chattanooga is going to be very proud of this board, you know, really soon, and once we get things in place. So definitely, Russell, let's see if we can get with Kay and figure out an email or phone number as well to send out to the people. Hold on 1 second before you speak, Councilman Gilbert. Councilwoman Coonrod, is that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand.
All right.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody and the citizens, that's our constituents that's listening, is that the 1994 crime bill, it has parts in there about the police accountability. So the Citizen Review Board isn't something that's new, that's been, you know, established. Chattanooga just now getting to the point where we're saying we really want this to be progressive and getting it really started and people latching on to it. But when I read through that, like, the police should be held accountable automatically. We're still in 2020 talking about we need a review board to hold them accountable for the mishaps and the misconduct and the breaking of our policies. And that's, our citizens feel like they're not being held accountable because nobody is, you know, explaining to them the process. Like Ms. K said, that it's a lengthy process. They expect the microwave results, which is instant firing of our officers, and that's just not how the process works. They have to go through the process, have their day in court. And a lot of times when Neil Pinkston, our district attorney, when he removes it out of our wheelhouse, when he says that he's gonna put it in another jurisdiction under TBI or FBI, that removes it completely from us altogether, right? And but Phil, my question to you is this.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that I know the state preempts us on a lot of things, and they're saying that they don't want us to have subpoena power, and, you know, the board to have subpoena power, and et cetera, et cetera. But is it anything saying that it can't be independent from the police department?
The provisions of any community oversight board, the final decision of what discipline occurs to an employee has to be in the police chief. Y'all can make recommendations in connection with that decision. And in fact, that's all through your ordinance here of making recommendations based upon what the public presents to this committee. And they make those recommendations, but the police chief is accountable as a person here to the city council and to the mayor, is the person that makes those final decisions.
Yeah, so I think with our citizens, when they're saying that they want something to be independent, they don't want it to be housed, I guess, directly with the police department. And when you look at other cities, and Russell mimicked ours from, you know, different cities in Knoxville and everybody, they have their own office, their own person hired, you know, they have a budget, those kind of things. So there's nothing preventing us from having those things. I know we've been working now for months on this Office of Community Resilience that we haven't got started yet, and which is another Band-Aid for stuff that we need to have already been addressed. But we need to think about what we appropriate our funds to, what departments that we're creating, and, you know, how does that work? Because that could have been its own independent operating budget there to help the oversight committee.
Yes,
Just my personal opinion. I'm not expecting for all 8 of you to agree with me, but I think we need to start looking at what's going to be the best way moving forward to address this thing, because it's going to continue to be an issue, whether we serve on council or not. So we most definitely need to, you know, think about changing a few things, and while we're in the early stages, before we have years of just a ordinance that's just useless.
Thank you for your comments, Councilwoman. Ms. Kay, I see you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. I don't see a button for me to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
So, I'm kind of stuck here. So I just wanted to mention, Mr. Watkins had mentioned, you know, missing case numbers, and I didn't, you know, nature abhors a vacuum, and I want to kind of tell you guys what we've learned. When IA gets a case or chain of command gets a case, they give it a number to 2020-01, 2020-02, and they get the number as it comes in as a complaint. So case number 2 might be something really quick, and they finish that investigation. So we get 2020-02 before we get 2020-01. And so I feel like we all felt comfortable with that. But what we're doing now going forward, we are going to be getting notification from chain of command, internal affairs. When they open a case number, they're going to give us just the case number, the officer, and the policy at issue, so we can keep track numerically. And then, you know, as we go through the months, you know, we can say, oh, well, gosh, we haven't heard from this case is from 6 months ago. Why haven't we heard this case? So that's something new too. And as I've described it already, I mean, this is a work in progress. So we're really trying to make sure that we're following up. And Ms. Campbell's helping us out a lot with that kind of stuff, you know, keeping us in line. Yeah, she's doing a great job. And so she's going to help with this tracking system that we've talked about doing, as a way for us to make sure that we are getting the cases, and they're going to be out of order. You know, that's just the nature of how an investigation happens. Some of them are faster than others. So, but it allows us to at least know that there are certain case numbers that are sitting in the IA or being investigated by chain of command. And if we don't see them for a while, we have the obligation to check in with the PD and say, why haven't we seen this case? And they may have a good reason for why we haven't seen it. It might be there's witnesses that are out of the country, or, you know, in the military, and they can't take their statement yet. I don't know, but there's all sorts of reasons that a case might take longer than another. But I'm hopeful that that will allow us to ensure that we are keeping up with the cases that make it to the police department, whether it's by citizen or internally, and we can just follow up as we need to.
And I think your quarterly report, Ms. Kay, will hold the chief accountable and everyone else accountable, also us, when it comes to how things are progressing with this board and how things are working out. If the chief is on board or not on board with cases, your quarterly report will help us see that, and our constituents see that as well.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, Councilman Gilbert, is that an old hand?
Well, I was going to say that I know we created a hotline in the past on other subjects, so maybe we can create a hotline that people can call in, and also, I guess, again, going back to the email address, that they can look at constituents' complaints that way. I think you get a lot more people send in more information if they can actually feel comfortable doing it that way.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Kay, here this week or next week, if you can follow up on some of the concerns that were brought forth to us today, and go over some of those things and review. I just want to thank you all. I hate that it feels like you're being sabotaged or beat up before you even get your feet up under you. I think you're doing an awesome job, and the only way we're going to strengthen this board is by building from the work you guys are doing now. And I think you gave us some great information just on this report, and I definitely look forward to your quarterly report in January. And I just know that this board is going to represent Chattanooga well, and just thank you for your diligence and your hard work. And I look forward to January hearing from you again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, just give me a call. We'll set something up.
Yes, ma'am. Is there any more questions or any more statements from anyone here today? No. All right, seeing no questions, I think at this point we will adjourn till 6 o'clock.
Hold on one second, Mr. Attorney. Do we need an attorney-client privilege?
Just briefly regarding a matter I talked with you once before on. It
Okay.
won't take long.
The next question, I'm not sure, is if the vice chair will be able to restart our meeting.
Good point.
Well, I can wait until later.
I'll tell you what, let's wait till later then, because I'm not sure that he
I can
is.
restart, Chairman.
You're here? Okay, all right,
He's there. All right.
all right. We'll restart attorney-client with a short break here.